This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and Upsnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to Sex is Medicine, your number one resource for holistic sex education. I'm Devi Ward Erickson, and I invite you to join me every week for another enriching and powerful conversation about the intersection of sexuality, spirituality, pleasure, and personal growth. Each episode of Sex is Medicine is dedicated to awakening your heart and mind to the true purpose and power of human sexuality. Please join me on this journey of self-discovery as we explore the art of using pleasure as medicine to awaken, heal, and empower every area of your life. Sex is Medicine broadcasts every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific on Contact Talk Radio Network. You can listen to the replay and subscribe to Sex is Medicine on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And now get ready for another episode of Sex is Medicine. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sex is Medicine. I am your host, Devi Ward Erickson, and I am so delighted to have you here with me once again for another delicious and enriching conversation about sexuality, spirituality, pleasure, and personal growth. I'm very excited this evening because I have a wonderful guest who is joining us. The very esteemed and honorable Victor Waring. This is a gentleman that I have wanted to have on our podcast for a very, very long time. And I finally worked up the courage because I am kind of shy. I finally reached up the courage to reach out and see if he might be interested in joining us. And I am very honored and delighted to share him with all of you. So thank you so much for joining me on the show, Victor Waring.
You are welcome. It's my pleasure. I'm glad you worked up the courage.
Yeah. So, Victor, I was so interested in having you on the show because you are a somatic sexual embodiment coach, and your focus is on this concept of rewilding Eros. And so that's what we're going to dive into today. But I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about who you are and your background and your journey.
Okay. Yeah. My name's Victor, and there's a couple of titles that I throw around, and I've never landed on the absolute best one, but somatic sexuality educator and coach, rewilder, definitely consider myself an erotic activist. Eroticism and pleasure and sexuality deserve some uplift in our culture, sex negative and pleasure phobic culture. And sometimes I did make this up, but I love the term shame whisperer. That's kind of fun.
Yeah. What does that mean to you? Shame whisperer. What does that mean?
Shame whisper is acknowledging the depth and the degree to which shame sculpts many of our erotic and sexual and relational lives. And in inviting someone to name things that feel like shameful things and to bring them into the light and to actually go, there's nothing wrong with the things that you want and desire in your body. So just whispering that shame. Yeah.
I love that because I find that too as well. It's very much the path of Tantra, at least in our lineage, bringing everything on the path and leaving nothing hidden. So those little secret hidden corners, particularly around our sexuality, that we cling to, oh no, it means I'm a horrible human. And then when we can kind of whisper them in the ear of a lover or a trusted friend or something like that, bringing them to light so that we're liberated and integrated.
Yeah. And to say it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. The things you want are part of your animal lineage and they belong there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of my background is, I was trained in, somatic psychotherapy. So I spent part of my life as a psychotherapist. I I have a degree in cultural anthropology, so that's definitely deeply woven into the things I do, understanding who we are as humans and as human primates, and also contact improvisation and body movement improvisation. Those are all kind of woven together and play.
Yeah. A lot I've noticed in your writing that you reference a lot our innate primate nature. So what is that about? Like that honing in, that emphasis on our nature as animals, as primates. Yeah. What does that represent?
Yeah. So part of it is just really a humbling piece. Just naming for myself, for us, that we're apes. We're literally one of the 5 species of great apes remaining on the planet. And that's what we are. And a lot of people, or some people, are resistant to that idea that we are apes. But it's like, yeah, that is what we are. Mm-hmm. And we can understand ourselves better from that vantage point. So that's one level of it. And then the other levels, and this has to do with the rewilding piece, is, I think it's important for us to remember that, the ape that we are today is very different than the ape that we evolved from. Or I should say, we're actually very similar, but the world that we've chosen to create for ourselves is very, very different. Mm-hmm. And so in many ways, in many actually painful ways, the ways in which we evolved, the context in which we evolved, the way our sexuality and our relationships evolved are at odds.
Yeah, with our nature.
With who we've said that we should be right now. And so a lot of times what I'll call who we are right now, I'll just name it as we are domesticated humans. Yeah. In a similar way that a pug is a domesticated wolf. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we've got certain issues. Yeah. Usually when you domesticate an animal, it has problems, and we've got some of those. And I guess maybe the last piece I'll say on that is, and to really emphasize with people the length of time that we were those animals before. And there's a lot of words that can go with that. Pleistocene humans, or paleo humans, or hunter-gatherers, or foragers, or pre-colonial humans. I mean, there's a lot of different words you can put in that. But we were that for a very long time. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've been around for 250,000 years as humans. And this last part, what we're doing as domesticated humans, has been about 10,000 years. Mm-hmm. So that's a much bigger part of us than this little tiny slice. So,
what role, if any, do you see that patriarchy has played in that? Because I think of that, what you're describing very often about like the fact that we're animals, right? And like our senses are ways to interact and survive and thrive in our environment, and how so much of our modern lifestyle dulls and numbs out our sensory experiences, but also in particular, like in the terms of, religion and even tantra, spirituality, there's a lot of emphasis on trying to override the animal nature or overcome the animal nature. So we're trying to overcome our basic innate humanity, essentially, like that's something to overcome. And in my mind, that has a lot to do with the concepts of the patriarchy, because at least in our lineage of tantra, The feminine is everything that is tangible. So the feminine represents our senses. It represents our attachment, our bonding, our mothering, our relationships, our sex. Like all of that is governed by the feminine in this particular lineage of Tantra. And I also know that in like monastic traditions, they're all trying to overcome our senses. They're all trying to deny or have aversion to sexuality. They teach an aversion even to having a family kind of thing. Your family, your intimate connections are something to overcome or override. So I see a really clear connection between this patriarchal mindset of male dominance and the I can't think of the word, the aversion or diminishment of our primate nature, as you say, our animal and human nature. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. In the world of domestication, we tend to see the body, and our nature and pleasure and sexuality and, as dangerous. And as things to be controlled or contained, so that if they're left to their own devices, things are going to run away from us. And we'll just run amok and, fuck everything in sight. And
because that would be terrible.
Blah, blah. Yeah, that'd be the worst thing ever.
I mean, we'd all just like sleep and eat. That would be
all that pleasure. Yeah. And so, I mean, I have a very distinct way of looking at this. And that is that, because people talk about patriarchy a lot. And people tend to think of patriarchy as something that has been with us since the beginning.
But it's not. It's new.
But it's new. I mean, where I come from and my understandings are, patriarchy is new, and it started, using broad brushstrokes about 10,000 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
When we stopped being hunter-gatherers, when we started becoming agrarians and started farming and started creating surplus food, and then needing to guard the food, and then needing to know where the resources all the surplus was going to go after we died. And then so it's like, oh, I need to know who my children are. Oh, I need to control women because that's how I know who my children, that was the ball that got all that rolling. And before that, and again, this is a broad brushstroke in terms of anthropology, but people who live in the world currently and in the past as hunter-gatherers, foragers, tend to live in very egalitarian cultures. Yeah. And it's not true across the board because they vary too, but that's one of the defining features of hunter-gatherers. They're egalitarian.
Yeah. And in an egalitarian society, so we'll circle back to rewild.
Sure.
I'm just like having fun going down this rabbit hole with you. In an egalitarian society, what does that look like? Because I know that there's like, my understanding, a little bit that I've understood is like matriarchal, what we call matriarchal societies could more accurately be described as egalitarian. So what does that mean, egalitarian?
Yeah. So there's a couple different levels to this. One big level is that, has to do with resources, things that are available for everyone to have. So in an egalitarian society, let's say what they call an original return or immediate return hunter-gatherer society, all the resources that come into the band, the village, whatever, it's not really a village because they're not settled, is available to everyone. Resources are not hoarded. They're not, if you go out and hunt, you don't go out and hunt and catch an antelope or gather roots and then bring it back to your isolated nuclear family. You bring it home and it's shared with everyone. And it's not because of nobility. It's because that's what works in a culture like that. So it's not like people are walking around going, "Oh, we're so good,"
we're so honorable and altruistic.
Yeah, no, it's hoarding and doing things like that. It would destroy that structure. So there's agreements in place, not necessarily agreements here, but an understanding that, yeah, we share this stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's one level of egalitarianism. Everyone has pretty much equal access to all the resources that come in, and there's not a value placed, like, oh, the men hunt and therefore that's more valuable than the women gather, and that's less. It's all equally valued.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's one level. And then the other level in terms of gender and sexuality, and that is that, I'm going to speak in a binary way. Mm-hmm. What women contribute and what men contribute are all valued, whether that's resources, decision making, all that kind of stuff. There's all of it's valued. The idea of, again, like what women contribute, we're not going to pay attention to because it's not as important because it's coming from
women's work.
Right.
Yes.
So that's my understanding of egalitarian. That's how that works. And again, I always like to be clear because it can be easy to like paint a broad brushstroke and go, oh my God, it was a utopia. It wasn't a utopia. It was people living their lives. But those are the general things that seem to have happened in some of these societies, and some of them that are still around now.
Yeah, and they lived in balance and harmony with their environment for thousands and thousands of years, whereas, in the last few hundred years, we're literally on the brink of destruction. So results. Thousands of years of balance and harmony, 200 years of chaos and almost destruction. So let's talk about rewilding. So because all of this is like, we're talking about like where we came from and where we are now, which is problematic. So what does it mean to rewild our eros, rewild our relationships?
Yeah. So first I want to also say rewild is not a term that I came up with. It's definitely a term that's out there, and people talk about it in a lot of different ways, from, developing primitive skills to even financial and social. It can be applied to a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. And I love applying it to sexuality. And so when I say rewild, to me, what that means is two things. One is recognizing the sort of modern accoutrement that don't serve us very well, like the things that we've taken on as domesticated humans that get in the way of sustainable erotic connection, of sustainable intimacy. And so I'll flesh that out with people. So that's one piece of it. And then the other part of it is understanding more. It's like this education of like who we are as animals, what seems to be more innate in us in terms of our sexuality and our sexual desires and the way that we tend to mate and connect with each other. And it's not about becoming wild. Like we're not going to become that again. We're not going to be hunter gatherers again, mm-hmm. even if we dearly, dearly wanted to. We can't do that. We can't go back. There's too many of us, and the psychology of what it's like to live like that is beyond most of us. But what we can do is go, oh, that's how we're supposed to be. That's how we evolved. Let's see what we can plug in to our lives now that fits, that makes us have a better feeling life. Yeah. That makes us have a better sense of being connected, like what's up here, what's here, and what's down in our genitals is like in alignment with each other. Mm-hmm. And then do our sexuality and our relationships from there and stop suffering so much, because that's what I see. I just see a lot of people, myself included, suffering and feeling bad or suffering and having relationships that are devoid of erotic connection, and intimacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially over time.
I love how you made a point of we can't go back to the way things were. But what I'm hearing is almost like a reclamation and pulling forward of those inherent aspects of our humanity that are still useful and can, again, help us have more ease and peace and self-acceptance ultimately.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not only are they useful, but they're just there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're just, it's written in our bodies. It's there. And so we spend a lot of time going, and that hurts.
Yes.
It hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts.
Yeah. And so in this journey, also you emphasize a somatic approach to rewilding. Why is it so important to have a somatic approach to this journey instead of just an intellectual practice?
Yeah. Because we live in bodies and sex happens in our bodies. Our life happens in our bodies. So if you don't learn things in our body, then, it's all well. It makes, a nice book or a good meme. But we're not living it. So taking these things, I mean, the intellect and our cognitive abilities are also part of our body. But it's going, okay, how do we bring the rest of it in? Like, what are the practices? What are the things that we can do to like really feel this on a full level, not just here?
Yeah. So like you talk about the head, the heart, and the genitals.
Yeah. Like and all the rest of it.
And all the rest of it. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So what are the things that we need to understand in order to begin this process of rewilding? What do we need to know about who we were, and what do we need to know about what's getting in our way of accessing who we were?
Yeah.
Who we truly are, I should say.
Yeah. Okay, how many hours do we have now?
We can get started. We can do as many more episodes as we want.
It won't really take hours. So I'll talk a lot about what I call like our original context.
I love that.
Okay. And so when I say original context, that's like the how we evolved as humans in terms of our society and the things that are in there, like our sexuality and our mating. And so one of the overall terms for that is community. Mm-hmm. We evolved in community. We evolved in tribes. We evolved in small bands of 20 to 50 people, at the most 150 at different times of the year. Basically, we evolved in a social structure where we could track everyone in our lives, and we knew we had relationship with everyone, and we knew everyone else's relationship. And that creates Christopher Ryan says it like this. It creates a level of intimacy that domesticated humans would find it difficult to tolerate.
I was just thinking that, like, that depth of intimacy, and also you can't hide anything. So that level of transparency and just openness and how much we hide in this society from ourselves and from each other out of fear. And in that type of dynamic, how you're constantly exposed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so some people hear that and they're like, oh my God, I would hate that. I want to have my privacy. It's not that you never had privacy, but you knew these people. These were people that you grew up with. These are your life mates. Yeah. And so that creates a dynamic of living that obviously it influences relationships. So I'll add in some other, qualities of that life. We already talked about resources. If you were mated with someone, there wasn't this idea that, oh, I mate with this one person and my mate supplies me with the things I need to live. And that, this whole idea of, and then I exchange, like if we're talking like men and women, then I exchange my sexuality for that security. That's not there. The unit of life is the community. And so that whole dynamic that we think of as so intrinsic to our relationships, is out the window. So I suspect that people relating like that, like if you were in a mating relationship, a sexual relationship, you engage with that relationship because you just wanted to be in that relationship. And you also had all these other relationships that were, I call it flattening romantic relationships. So the way we think of relationship right now, like, it's reflected in our songs and all that stuff, is like romantic and sexual relationships are like up here. And we talk about them like, my one and only, my endless love, all of that.
Luther Vandross.
Yeah. And then all the other relationships are like down here. You have friendships and they just kind of like skulk around down here. But the real thing is like this. And my suspicion is in those societies, it looked more like that.
Again, egalitarian.
Yeah. And so your mating relationships were important. But because you weren't reliant on your mate for everything, I think you probably had a lot more freedom to have things like Eros and intimacy live longer than what they do now. Because what we do now, maybe I'll skip ahead till now, is since we don't have community anymore, except very superficially. I mean, what we call community is typically like people who get together every once in a while to do something that they like dance or knit or whatever it is. Or maybe church. That's like once a week. Mm-hmm. But that's what we call community often. And so it's more superficial. And so what we've done is, instead of, in our evolved way of being, community was this web of people. And now what we've done is we've made our relationships our community. Yeah. We've made it like a community of two people, and it's not enough. And what it tends to do is it tends to make us put everything we want and need and hope for on this one other person. And in my opinion and in my experience and when I look at people in their relationships, that level of pressure on a relationship, kills Eros. Yeah. And it kills intimacy, and it makes us,
implode.
And enmesh.
Yes.
Enmeshment is our relationship style, where people fighting against being enmeshed. And enmeshed is what's enshrined in all of those songs that we love, and all those romantic comedies that we love. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the standard, is that, and this belief that there's something wrong if this person isn't your sun, your moon, and your stars and your everything. Right. That there's something wrong and that you're not truly in love if that's not the case.
Right.
And that it's that, and creating that dependence on one person. It's like I said, it's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. And then on the purely sexual side, I don't know how many people I've seen, it's like, oh, I am with my soulmate, my true love, and we've been together for 10 years and we don't fuck anymore, or very, very little. And I find myself wanting to fuck other people. That's on my mind. There's something wrong with me. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with you. It's one of the baselines of humanness is we want to fuck other people. We can make choices about that and agreements. And I encourage people, let's make agreements about that. If you're monogamous, at some point we're going to want to fuck other people, but that's not what we're doing in this. We're going to agree to bring it back, but let that be the baseline, instead of like, oh my God, I want to fuck somebody else. There's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with that person, because they're not doing it for me anymore, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And not understanding that it's because we've been domesticated, so to speak, that we're having this loss of Eros, this loss of excitement and newness and energy. And yeah. Yeah. And emotional, and being able to resource our emotional support from other places and not just this one person.
Yeah. I really love, I don't know if have you read, Esther Perel and Mating in Captivity? Yeah. And she describes this as, I think she says it like this. If she doesn't, I say it like this, the erotic synapse. So the way a synapse works between two nerve cells is that they have a certain separation between them. And that separation is what allows electricity to go across it for the nerve cells to function. And if they were like right on each other, they wouldn't function. And so similarly, like in our relationships, we need a degree of separation in order and in that space is where eroticism lives. And the way we do relationships, again, sort of generalizing across the board, is we do them like this. And it kills Eros over a long period of time.
Yeah. So there's so much here, and there's the enmeshment, but then there's all the baggage that we carry into our relationships, and all of the cultural and social conditioning that we undergo that tell us that our humanity is wrong or egregious, particularly when it has to do with sexuality. So what is the relationship between domestication of us as humans and the infusion of morality and sexual shame and guilt and all of that in conjunction with that?
Yeah. So, I will talk about this rewilding thing, and it can sound like really like awesome. Like, yeah, let's just get that old good stuff and bring it in. It's hard, and it's hard because, and I don't want to. I'm always careful because I don't want to pathologize us, but being a domesticated ape leaves a mark.
Yeah. Wow.
And those marks are things like trauma.
Yeah.
They're things like, 10,000 years of patriarchal oppression. Yeah. They are things like slavery.
Yeah.
There are things like, thousands of years of church. That stuff leaves a mark, and you don't give up trauma just because you decide to give it up one day. It's that is in our bodies. So this rewilding thing that I talk about, I understand that bringing these elements in from who we are, who we were, is coming into bodies that are marked ancestrally from our families, from our culture, by lots of junk and trauma and baggage. And so sometimes what people envision they would like isn't possible. And so we have to find, it's kind of this nuanced thing. We have to find like, how are these things, how can these land in us? And also be accepting of the fact, like, let's say someone wants to be non-monogamous. They want to have a non-monogamous relationship. It's like, in their mind, it's what they thought they would want to do, all that kind of, and they're like, maybe they're with a partner and the partner's like, I'm not sure. They may discover that what they want, and even what might have been more true in our past, I think there's a lot of different ways people did relationships in the past. It wasn't like all non-monogamy. I think there was a whole bunch of stuff. But they might find out that for themselves, in their own body, given their levels of trauma and attachment and baggage, they can't do it.
Yeah.
Or they might discover, I thought that I would want polyamory. I thought I would want like deep, full-on relationships with different people. But what I discovered is, I can't do that, but I can do sex.
Mm-hmm.
And that might not jive with what they think is okay, but it's like, well, is that doable for you, or do you, or not?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot that happens in this exploration that has to do with like, what's my personal baggage, what's my personal history, what's my what's my trauma? What are the things that have landed on me from my family and the cultures in my past that have like clashed with each other and all of that.
And I love that you make that point that what we think that we might want is not necessarily what is in our best interest. Right?
It may not be what our body can tolerate.
Exactly. And that is so huge, and really attuning to the body and honoring when it's not appropriate for us to move in a certain direction, particularly in sexuality, because that's the other thing I see, particularly in the field of sexuality. There can be a lot of shaming in the opposite direction. Like initially it's like, morality and judgment and blah, 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 but then you break free and oh, I'm a big sex educator, sexual empowerment person, whatever. And now there's shame about not fucking enough people
you're not fucking everybody?
Not wanting to fuck anybody. Maybe you don't want to fuck anybody, right? So
you're not female ejaculating. I mean, everyone females ejaculate.
I know what's wrong. Your
it's
practice
the new
is
thing.
Exactly. Your practice is obviously insufficient, right? So the shaming in the other direction of the expectations that we put upon ourselves, and this ideal of what it means to be truly sexually liberated. Again, that's going to be so unique to all of us. And I will say, from my personal journey, like the more sexually liberated and healed and empowered I became, the less people I wanted to actually have sex with. When I was fucking everybody, it's because I was totally disassociated from my body. So I could fuck everybody because I couldn't feel anything, right?
Right.
But when I actually came home to my body and was present in my body and really connected to my heart, I was like, I want my soul to be nourished from my sexual connections, because that's what's true for me.
Yeah.
And so I just love that you emphasize that point of what we think rewilding is going to look like could be very, very different than how it actually manifests for us based on our individual experiences.
Right. Yeah. And people hear the word wild and they think it means like free for all. It's like, no, it means integrated and more authentic. And that might mean, it can mean a lot, like you were saying, a lot of different things for different people. And a lot of people do a lot of fucking because they don't feel or they're trying to feel. So for some people it might mean, oh, actually I don't need or want to actually do that. And for some people it might mean, I'm a fucker. And I've been ashamed about that my whole life, and I've got a whole lot more fucking to do. So for, but I want to do it with my heart, and I want to do it, with a sense of integrity and truth with the people that I'm doing that with. I don't want to like leave any bodies in my wake.
Yeah. Yeah. Fallout.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever used that before. Some people are just fuckers.
I've got a whole lot more fucking to do. Don't want to leave this world with fucking.
Yeah, I want to have all my fucks fucked. Yeah,
important. It's a good life goal.
Yeah. This might be a post-COVID mantra. There's a lot of people that are pretty contained right now, and
yeah. Well, I mean, self-fucking has been like, when in doubt, boy, this is a time to dive deep into your solo yoga. Yeah.
Actually, you're bringing up a completely important point I want to name.
Yeah.
Because I will say that self-fucking or self-pleasure is one of the baseline practices that I talk about with people, because I talk a lot about erotic sovereignty.
Yeah.
And so developing a practice of self-pleasure that's really about understanding what your body wants, what pleasures it, what happens when you move a little bit away from, I'll make this distinction of getting off masturbation. And not that that's awesome too, but when you pull back a little bit from that and more into self-pleasure, it's like, it's about slowing down a little bit. It's like, what does my body want? What is my pleasure? And then the sovereignty of that is like standing in it and being like, this pleasure is mine. Mm-hmm. This erotic sovereignty is mine. Mm-hmm. It's old. I came into the world with it. Mm-hmm. It's not yours. Mm-hmm. I choose to share it with you. We choose to share it with each other, but this is mine. Mm-hmm. And that is such the powerful stance of erotic sovereignty that, it feels like one of the foundations of some of the work that I do.
Absolutely. And I 100% wholeheartedly agree, because it's the way I view it is our birthright to take erotic pleasure from our bodies is something, again, we experience in utero. I mean, fetuses will self-pleasure in utero. And we all, as little humans, little primates running around, we're all up in our genitals. And then someone said, no, don't do that. And so that connection was broken. That instant, joyful, inherent connection to sensual, sexual pleasure was conditioned out of us, was shamed out of us. And so for me in my work, for me personally, and, when I started this 13 years ago, and then in my work professionally, this is one of the hugest pieces of reclamation of what you say are erotic sovereignty or sexual sovereignty or humanity is reclaiming the right to pleasure our genitals for no other purpose other than just that pleasure in that moment. So, I love that stepping away from orgasm is the goal, because so often when orgasm or getting off is the goal, there's so much emphasis on that the emphasis isn't on the body and the messages of the body. And very often there's a tendency to override the messages of the body to get to that goal. So I love that self-pleasure. It's reorienting the emphasis to the body, to connection with the body. And to exploring and allowing this, as you say, inherent, innate pleasure to arise and express itself how it wants to through our bodies. And that changes the whole game of relationships. Because I'll speak for myself, when I gave myself the best fucking orgasms of my life, I was like, oh, y'all better bring it. Like, I'm not compromising. Because as gender heterosexual women, we're taught that we're taught to compromise, and at least in Generation X, my generation, we're taught to compromise, and like sex is kind of on the back burner, and you kind of get what you get. But when I started,
it's okay. I'm just in it for the closeness.
Yeah, exactly. I just want the intimacy, and that's all well.
And that's true too. Yeah,
it's true too. And like I don't want to live the rest of my life without having fucking orgasms with my partner. And so when I was able to truly experience, like literally, not even joking, some of the best orgasms of my life with myself, with my hand and my toy and my whatever, it was a game changer. I was no longer willing to settle or compromise for anything less. And so it was a huge source of self-empowerment. Yeah.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that have been, and usually more women than men, that have been trained to wait for their pleasure to come at the hands of somebody else.
Yes, exactly.
And when you talk about codependence, when you talk about getting your resources from someone else, it's a really unpowerful position. And so, like I said, that's where I start. And then I usually take it up a notch. So there's like developing a self-pleasure practice for yourself. Mm-hmm. There can be developing a self-pleasure practice with your partner. So standing in the presence, of another. And again, going, this is mine, and it may even be a practice where, for this practice, this isn't about like using that to then just come together, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for this practice, like, we're going to witness each other and see what it feels like to like be in this pleasure and also be witness to you, but to like stay with this. And then if you want to take it up a notch from there, because I do these groups too, to self-pleasure in community, in circle. And to do that with a group of people is just like, it can be mind blowing. Like, I can do this.
That's huge.
I can hold this with this group of people, and to connect that up with rewilding. I don't know, and I don't even guess that Paleolithic humans like sat around and self-pleasure together. If they did,
well, and the tantric tradition, yes, they did.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
Yeah. But I do know what happened is that they were used to the sights, the sounds, and the smells of the people in their community having sex.
Yes.
That was not unusual because, if you live in a small place, if you live in a longhouse, if that was just part of the ecology. Mm-hmm. And not only was it part of the ecology that people tolerated, I think it actually fed into the aliveness of the community.
Hell yeah.
Like when you hear people fucking from across the way, you're like, oh, I think I want to do that too. And
I'm just saying, I've had roommates that are like, oh, I'm sorry you heard me having sex last night. I'm like, why are you apologizing to me?
Do you know who you're talking to?
Yeah. I'm like, I love waking up at 2 a.m. to the sound of you coming. Like, that is awesome. Like, why wouldn't I want to hear you coming from across the house?
Yeah. I'm actually sad that I don't hear it. that when people are trying to be contained and, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's part of our lineage. Wow. And so one of the things that I offer is self-pleasure circles, where we get to experiment with that and see what the hell comes up in doing that.
Because a student who I'm going to hook you up with, or hook her up with you, because she's like, do we get to do this? I'm like, no, it's not that kind of party, but now I know where to send her. I know. But that's beautiful. And what I'm resonating with about that is again, how much shame we have about sexual pleasure and how much shame we have specifically about self-pleasure, right? It's got to be done quietly and as quickly as possible. In the shower really quick, or with your shower head, or like with your vibrator, and you right? So to be able to be in a group of people and, like, again, without this goal, it's not like a circle jerk necessarily, but with this goal of just building and experiencing and cultivating pleasure and being witnessed in that. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. And like I said, dealing with the stuff that comes up.
Oh my God.
Because, and granted, I will say this, it's not for everyone. Regardless of where they are, but yeah, stuff comes up about everything, from like, we talk about in those circles, what's the difference between witnessing what's happening, and objectifying what's going on.
So huge.
I've one of the practices, and again, to be generalized, like with men and women in those conditions. I think a lot of men are trained to not be in here and to go, I need to gather this from outside of me. Yeah. And it's wonderful to see and witness things, but also, like, what's it like to take this in here and to be in the presence of all this beautifulness, but also to, like, really firmly be in here, and that totally is at odds with like the whole, when I think about schools, and the whole thing of, like, whatever we tell girls to, like, not dress in a certain way because all that external stuff will distract the boys. It's like, well, what's it like to teach boys to be masters of their energy and their energy?
Yeah.
I can, you can do math and also see beautiful shoulders or whatever it is you're seeing from across the room. And not place that on the backs and bodies and psyches, and the oppression of women.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of avoidance in this whole conversation about sexuality and humanity and where we're at today. There's a lot of avoidance in addressing directly men being connected with their bodies and mature and responsible with their sexual energy. And, including, like, in our tradition, like, learning to separate orgasm from ejaculation and ejaculate by choice as opposed to reflex, and being able to master your sexual energy so that you can last, so that you can cultivate as much pleasure for as long as you want to, and then ejaculating or emitting by choice, but again, not by reflex. So it's this reclamation of, the way I think of modern male sexuality, it's like a 15-year-old boy. They've never matured beyond that. That's conventional Western male sexuality. It's literally a 13 to 15-year-old boy. And there's never been any rite of passage. There's never been any maturing of your sexuality as a man. You just hit puberty, and then it's like puberty until you die, essentially.
Right.
That makes sense?
Yeah. Or it's puberty until, because a lot of men, as we start to age and, your bodies start to change, there's like this tremendous, like, beating up of ourselves of like, oh, my body isn't acting like an 18-year-old's. My erections aren't as present, or they're not as rock hard, or, the volume of my semen is lessened. And if your expectation is like, that's how your sexuality will be until the day you die, but it's doing something different than that.
Yeah.
It's awful. And there's similar but different stuff in female bodied people and all the bodies. I keep talking, I always want to bring in, I'm talking in the binary. There's all the genders and all the bodies.
Everything in between. Yeah. So in this conversation, what does your work look like now due to COVID? So if we want to get into these levels and these different journeys that you take people through to help us rewild our eros and sexuality, how do we get hooked up with that in the time of COVID?
Yeah. In the time of COVID, and even before COVID, but definitely in the time of COVID, I work with people like this over Zoom. Sometimes I work with people on the phone, but Zoom is better because you can actually see people and have like, now I'm back here, now I'm up here. So it's completely doable work in this format. It's a wonderful place to get started. And actually, it makes this work accessible to more people, because even if I can see someone in person, and even if we do more experiential work, or I do some hands-on work as well. But if you live in Germany, that's not going to happen unless we're doing something like this, or unless, someone flies me to Germany, which is, I value myself, but not everyone's like flying me to Germany or wherever. So yeah, on Zoom is a great place to work. And then I'll specifically, work somatically with helping people in a format like this, to feel even more. It's like, okay, let's understand our nervous system a bit, because even though we're in different parts of the world right now, we're actually in contact.
Yeah.
And it's not the same as being in the same room. I can't smell you. There's no opportunity for us to literally touch, but I'm in energetic connection with you. Yeah. And we can even like stir the pot to do things that heighten that. So, I'll talk with people about mirror neurons, and we'll like move together, and, let's put our hands to the screen, and we can if we like do that, it's like, oh my God, I can feel you doing that, because my nervous system is going, oh, I feel that, Wow. So that's possible. It's not as like ideal as most people think of, to be in the same space. And the interesting thing is, in some ways, for some people, having physical, geographical distance, but connection actually lets them be a little braver.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, oh, we're not actually in the room together. I feel more certain of doing certain things.
Yeah. So. Beautiful. So we're going to put all of your contact info on our website, authentictantra.com, and under this post. But for the people who are just listening on Spotify or iTunes or TuneIn, what is your contact info so that people can get a hold of you?
You want me to say, emails and stuff like that.
Yeah. People driving up here listening.
Yeah. Well, drive carefully. So I can be found on. I'll just say the things. So I can be found on Facebook. Under my name, Victor Waring. And my Facebook professional page is called OVO, Somatic Sexuality Education. And OVO is a fancy way of saying from the beginning, or from the egg.
Oh, I like that. Wow. Yeah.
So that's Facebook. And my website is current website is Embodied Intimacy at WordPress. It's a WordPress one. Okay. And I just use my regular email, so Victor Waring, all one word, at mac.com.
Okay, wonderful.
So that'll get you there.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Because some people, we posted under the video and all that stuff, but I want people to have your contact info just in case they're on the fly and they want to reach out to you.
Yeah. I always tell people Facebook is such a weird world. And it's getting weirder. But, some people reach out via Facebook and they'll, people friend you. And as the longer I'm on Facebook, the more people friend me. And, I always tell people, if you friend me, send me a message. Because, it's there's this person I don't know. We have one person in common or no person in common. And maybe they have a page where because of their privacy settings, it's you can't even see who so it's anyway, send a message so I know why you're reaching out.
Yes. Okay. So if you've heard Victor on this episode and you want to make contact, make sure you send him a message. And I heard you want sexual medicine. Let's talk.
Yeah. I want to know more about what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will respond.
Well, you are an incredible wealth of information. I've so enjoyed connecting with you, and I'd love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite things in the world is to talk about sex and sexuality, and sometimes often to get down and gritty with it. So this is just wonderful, and I'm glad you're doing this, obviously.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, that is it for today. Unfortunately, our hours go very, very quickly. So thank you, Victor, for joining us. We will absolutely have more conversations like this again. And thank you, audience, for tuning in and joining us. And I'm just so, so grateful for all of you listeners. And I'm so grateful for you, Victor, and all of our incredible guests for just bringing it, for filling our ears with wisdom elixir. So have a beautiful evening, and we will talk soon. See you next week, guys.
Bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Sex is Medicine with Devi Ward Erickson, your #1 resource for holistic sex education. You can listen to and subscribe to Sex is Medicine on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Just search Sex is Medicine with Devi Ward. Stay connected with me and my guests on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Authentic Tantra, and learn how you can use Tantra as medicine to heal, awaken, and empower every area of your life at AuthenticTantra.com. Make sure to tune in to Sex is Medicine every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific on Contact Talk Radio Network, and join our watch party every Thursday evening on Facebook at Authentic Tantra. We look forward to you joining us next week for another episode of Sex is Medicine with Devi Ward.